What's up, Zen Podcast listeners? Welcome to episode number 9. Been kind of a crazy couple weeks. I always say that. I always say, because life is always crazy, right? Right? Um, Today's episode is a more of a historical perspective. And even if you're not from a small town, especially if you're not from a small town, this is going to be really interesting to you. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Everett Parker. I want to say he's in his mid 80s. I'm not sure of his exact age, but he grew up in my hometown of 96, South Carolina. And just to let you know how small the town is, I'm not sure of the population, but we had two hallways in our high school, and there's two red lights. But the town is actually the place of the very first land battle of the Revolutionary War. And I just wanted to see what it was like growing up years and years ago in this town, which is still a really small town. Uh, and I learned a lot of things. For instance, there were Nazi prisoners here during World War II who were actually doing work. I guess they were prisoners, and they were prisoners of war, and they had them doing work in some of these fields. Never knew that. Really good conversation. I enjoyed talking with Everett. I enjoyed meeting him. Hopefully we'll be able to get together and do it again. I learned a lot. But I will go ahead and give you my guest, Everett Parker. The Zen Podcast. Grow your mind.
The dude abides.
All right, Everett, thank you for doing this. I appreciate you meeting. So, like I told you when I called you, I really want to get a good picture of what '96 was like back, back in like the '70s and the '60s, and I know you were in the Navy for a while. So, if you could just maybe kind of give me a kind of a picture of what it was like in your childhood. You said you moved here when you were about 5 years old.
We moved here to 96 when I was 5 years old. The road now that's located on 702, and it was a store down there by the name of Greens. It's across from the state park. Back then they had the color state park, and you had the white state park. And we lived about a half a mile off the road in a pea field. The old house had no running water.
Oh, wow.
It had no outhouse. It had wood.
So that was the outhouse. The woods were the outhouse.
It had a spring about 100 yards from the house that we toted water from to do the necessaries of cooking and washing. And the old house didn't have any windows in it. It had shutters. Just an old door, like a barn door. Had a chain that ran through the door. You put a lock on it after you left it. I mean, let's face the fact, who in the world would break into a house
There's nothing
to
there.
tote off a 400-pound wood stove?
Right. So was that like the only thing of value in there? Was the wood stove?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Period, really. The house had no walls like sheetrock or wood. It had no ceiling in it. It was just like a barn, really.
And what year was this?
This was in 1941.
1941. Okay.
So I started school at 6 years of age at 96. It was just 96 school.
It was just like a one-room building at this time?
No. It had a high school and it had a grammar school. I was in the grammar school, as they call it. There were no such things as kindergartens or when I first started school, there was no such thing as a 12th grade. You went to the 11th and you graduated. My first grade school teacher was Miss Stanford. Now, I'm not saying about everybody, but back at that era of time, some folks didn't teach their kids how to write or be prepared for school. And one of the first things that I was asked to do was write my name in standard did. And I cried because I
You had
couldn't
no clue how to do it.
I had no idea. Back then we had the old line tablets and a big pencil. So when I got into second grade, Ms. Nita Moore, she was my second grade teacher. And then we had moved from 96 to a place down on, used to be where the old McLean place was at that time. And it was about, probably around about 2 miles from the dam site. that dam was fixed down there in
Down for
1939.
Buzzard Roost?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Buzzard Roost. And we moved into a two-story house that a fellow by the name of Chris Bond owned it. And it was a little two-story house, fairly new. And they had an old store down there, which was owned by Red McLean. And I would go along the ditches, and back then they had beer bottles that was this amber-looking color. And you could get 3 cents a piece for those things. I'd go along and try
And they were
to
just
pick it
lining
up.
the ditches?
Yeah.
So people were just riding around?
I didn't ride around,
No,
I
I'm
walked.
saying they were riding around, drinking beer and just throwing them.
Whoever
I guess.
had it or even walking. Anyway, I'd go down and sell them to Mr. Red and whatever he had in the store pertaining to a Coca-Cola or penny candy or whatever like it.
How much would they sell for?
Coca-Cola back then was 5 cents.
So to buy a Coke was 5 cents? Or you got 5 cents for the bottle?
No, I got 3 cents.
3 cents for the bottle, okay.
3 cents for the bottle. Well, in some a little over a year, I got Christmas of that year, I got a Red Ryder BB gun. I always remember this. And a fellow by the name of Monroe Carey, which he's deceased now. I had my finger over in the barrel. Why, I don't know. And I asked Monroe not to pull the trigger.
Because
And
you
he
were a
pulled
kid,
the
that's
trigger,
why.
Yeah. I was 7-year-old at the time. He pulled the trigger, and I wound up at the doctor here in 96 at the time called Dr. Snyder, which was a doctor here for many years. And his old building down here is next to the old cannery, where you see the 96 maintenance crew has got it now. It used to be, and probably still is, one room in it is for children that can't get along in school and whatever. It's
Like an alternative school.
It's an
type of
alternative
thing.
school, just a step away from going to the big house. Or
Right.
to the juvenile
It's the
delinquent
warning
house
before
out
you
there.
go.
Yeah. But anyway, he was in the upstairs old Peanut Street at the time. And I went to him, and he didn't see anything in there. And probably around about a month or so, 6 weeks later, he discovered a little ball up there. My daddy said, if you'll let them take that out, I'll give you a Pepsi Cola and a pack of crackers. I mean, Pepsi Cola was big time stuff, okay? Wasn't gonna bypass that. No Novocaine, no nothing. A scalpel to cut my finger open and take that.
And you were
BB shot.
7 years old, right?
Yeah. Cut that.
And then you
finger.
turn to your dad and you're like, all right,
He paid-
where's the
he gave
Pepsi?
me Pepsi Cola. Yeah, I got it. Well, at that time, we moved back into the township of 96, and a place just down the street on South Cambridge called Parkman Circle. And I was still in the second grade, mind you, at the time. And a tornado came through here in 1943. We had a picture show uptown here on West Main. It tore the picture show down, killed a Crowder girl that lived in the upstairs apartment. And Mr. Crowder, he was a plumber down here at the old 96 plant mill. Well, the show was down for probably, I don't know, close to a year, I guess, something like that. Chauffeur at the time was only something like 9 cents, but if you didn't have the 9 cents, you didn't go, which I didn't have it. Well, we stayed in that house on the corner down there, which where Fortin's got some apartments there now. We moved around Parkman Circle to another house, and we stayed in there until 1940. 44, 45. And then we moved to Saluda Street, which was an extension of Saluda Street. It's called Liberty Street now. You're probably familiar with it.
I'm familiar with Saluda
Okay,
Street.
there was only 8 houses on that Liberty Street. And at that time, there were 37 kids in them 8 houses, and one house didn't have no children. With a fellow named W.T. Fane, him and his wife didn't have no children. And he was the only fellow on the street that owned an automobile, which was an A-Model Ford.
That's why he could afford an automobile. He didn't have kids.
Didn't have kids. Well, at that time right there, the mill village, they had a school down here, just across from the Cambridge Methodist Church, which is probably by the name of Smith, now Dan Smith is the pastor of it now. I don't know who it was back then. But at that time we had outhouses. We had indoor plumbing. We had one light that hang down from the ceiling, you turn it on, and the iron you could hook up to that with electric iron. Now I need to back up for just a moment. When we first came to 96, there was no such thing as electricity. We used kerosene lamps.
Oh, so no electricity at
No
all
electricity
in
at
96.
all.
Wow.
Not where we lived, okay?
Okay.
Not where we
Right,
lived.
out toward the state park. Yeah.
And folks back then, including my mama, what you do is have a fire in the wood stove. And you'd put the old type irons, just irons, with no electricity and to it, sit on top of the wood stove. And you would iron the shirt collars and this and up the middle of the front. And back then, a substitute for starch, because starch wasn't available to people who couldn't afford it. We were one of them, a family of them. And what you do is take some flour, just some sifted flour, biscuit flour, and mix a little bit in some water, and you put it on the collar and on the sleeves and up the front, and you sprinkle it on with a Coca-Cola bottle, put your finger over the end of it, sprinkle it, and then roll it back up. Well, at that time, we had wash pots that we washed clothes in. There was no such thing as we knew it,
It's a washing
as a
machine.
washing machine.
Was that the
It
thing
didn't
with the little
exist.
grate, like the grate where you
Yeah, that's what you call
the
a
washboard?
Yeah.
Washboard, yeah.
Yeah. And Mama boiled the clothes, and we had rinse pots. We had to tote all the water down from the spring to accommodate this. And everybody in the family that was old enough participated in the family's activities of either getting wood, toting water, or anything. Well, we didn't have to worry too much about sweeping the house. We had a kind of an old type broom.
Mhm.
And if you swept sideways, it all fell through the floor. You didn't have to worry
Oh,
about
wow.
sweeping it out the door, getting a dustpan and getting it up, okay?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to the middle village, okay? We lived in next to the last house on the right side going up Liberty Street. Fellow lived by us was Pinckney Butler. Next door was a fellow by the name of Harvey Butler. On the opposite side of the street was a fellow by the name of Mr. Price and his family. Albert Burt and his family lived on the left side. And Woody McLean lived in the other house next to the one that coming up on the left. And a fellow by the name of J.C. Goldman, which J.C. Goldman was pretty notorious. He had 10 children,
Oh, wow.
but I was reading in my graveyard book just a little bit ago. He actually had 12 children, and 2 of them died. One of them at birth, and one of them lived 2 years.
What's the graveyard book?
I'm a director of Elwyn Cemetery Association. I'm the president of it.
Okay.
Here in 96, if you go out North Cambridge, North Cambridge, and turn right on Wilson Road. It's immediately to your left. There's a little restaurant sitting on the hill called Cafe on the Hill or Grill on the Hill. You've probably seen it before. Elwood Cemetery is well over 10 acres located out in there. James, I know more people in that cemetery than I do in 96
I imagine
because
so.
all I'm told and they're gone. But anyway, I started school down at what they call the elementary school down at the Mill Village. Back in the year of time, Mr. Self, he built from the Mill Village, which was 96 plant. Mr. Self, he occupied that mill in 1922, and he done some remodeling, getting new machinery in 1927. A lot of folks always, I don't know why it is, I guess it was just in that era of time, they didn't have no air conditioning in the mill. They didn't have nothing but what was called a dope wagon that came through.
A dope wagon?
A dope wagon. Now the reason it was called a dope wagon is because the Coca-Cola at that time had the cola nut in it, which the cola nut is actually an ingredient for cocaine.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what it is.
I'd always heard that. I always
Okay.
heard that they had actually
Well,
had it in there.
They pushed it through the mill 2 times during a shift, and people who could afford it, they bought a dope off of it, as they called it, and a sandwich which was made. Mr. Self's mill down there, he built a cafe, uh, a clothing store, a grocery store, a school, a church. And back in that era of times, they could select a preacher to come in, and the superintendent of the mill or the mill owner, which was Mr. J.C. Self, and I have nothing but high remarks for him. I never met the old man personally, but I love that old man. I love that old man.
Well, because he
Because of
opened
what
up the
he did.
school and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
He was interested in his employees, okay? And in the year of time down here in the 96 Mill Village, which the reason those mill houses were built is when the mill started up in 1902, there were 6 investors that started that mill. And the people that could only come to that mill was the ones that was next to it. Mode of travel just was not there. So what they did was they built that mill and they built mill houses. And as a usuality, they wanted how many rooms it was in the house, where it was 3 rooms or 4 rooms, but each room should have a person working in that mill. And they charged 25 cents for each room. That included water, that you went out to a community well and was all out in the back, and an outhouse in the back.
25 cents a month?
25 cents a week for each
A
room.
week still. Wow.
That amounted to $1 a month. But your electricity and your water was afforded to you. Well, in 1927, he got the mill. He bought the mill from them. But 1922, he bought the mill from those investors, and it became his. The 96 plant is what it became known as. And I started the school down there under Ms. Lipscomb in the 3rd grade. They was bullies in school, just like they are right now. One guy in particular that lived on Sorreen Street, and he's dead and gone. And I don't really think I should name him particularly, but he was a real.
Well, Siren's still kind of a rough.
It was the rough of roughies in '96, honestly. But he used to about whoop up on me about every day. I could take on his younger brother, which was about the age as I was, but I couldn't take him on. He was just too much for me. Well, I'd kind of try to go through a cow pasture, which was on the back of Whitening Avenue, and I'd cut across the pasture to go to my home down there. And the lady next door, Miss Callie Butler, she died. And I remember going off in the fields on Mr. Ayrton's property, and she had cancer, but nobody knew what cancer was at the time, really. You know? And I picked her a bouquet of jonquils. Jonquils was out in the field at the time, and took them back to her. And she was so happy with that, but it hurt me to see her die and pass away. It really did.
So did they know she had cancer? They just knew she was sick, but they didn't really have any research.
She was bedridden. So Mr. Pinckney, when she died, he was left with 2 boys, well actually 3 boys. The youngest one was Ralph. He was just a toddler really. Mr. Butler was a stern man, and I mean, when he said something, it happened.
You better do it.
Church of God was just over the hill. They used to scare the hell out of me when I was a little fellow. They'd get up there and want to preach for the world in. They didn't have no air conditioning. They raised up the windows, and we didn't live. It just probably as far as from here to Wiley Carlisle across the street. And I mean, the sound really carried. They testified, and it was very laudable, honestly. I'd cover up my head. You know,
So they're preaching about damnation and the end of times, and it's so hot that it kind of feels like you're already in hell.
Yeah. I went to church up there for a while. Miss Oots was my Sunday school teacher, and every now and then she'd take us for out in the country. We walked, okay, for a little weenie roast. And man, I tell you what, I mean, you've heard that old remark about walking a mile for a camel.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd walk 2 or 3 or 4 miles to get that, really, you know. I really.
That was like the highlight.
So Ms. Oops, she fixes, we'd make a roast a hot dog out there and have that. And I did originally like to go to preaching because they were so loud, they scared me. Well, we started to a place right across from called the Pentecostal Church, which is now down on State Street, I think it is. Anyway, it's grown a lot bigger, but it used to be a one-room building right across the street where the school playground is at now for the primary school. And Billy Powell was a young fella that played the guitar. And Billy right now, I don't know if he's still alive, but he became a TV commentator for Channel 4 News and whatever here, well, up at Greenville. When he was in the Army, he did some of the recordings and stuff like that. Billy was good. Well, I got to the 4th grade, and I'd go down to the woods and pick blackberries down in the cow pasture. Each one of the cow pastures, as we call it, consists of some stalls, several stalls for cows, and those who would want to have a milk cow, they could go to Mr. Self and pay 50 cents down on it, and 50 cents a week or 2 weeks or whatever. I really don't know that.
So for a milk cow, you can pay 50 cents. So that was about the same as it cost to rent a room in a milk village house.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So they'd buy the cow, and they had stall and what they provided for him. They had the pasture provided for him, and they had, you could put hogs down there. Okay. They also had places behind your house you could pin in for chickens. People had what they call a little old victory garden back in that era of time.
Yeah.
And they would have, like some green beans and cucumbers and tomatoes, etc. There wasn't one kind of tomato, which was a Rutger. And I guess it's probably one kind of corn. I don't know, something like horse corn, so to speak.
Now there's hundreds of all of it, like all genetically modified.
Anyway, we didn't have a tiller, we didn't have a garden. So what I did was, when plums was in season, Mr. Roy Cannon cut hair down here at the barber shop in '96. He would buy the plums from me. A lady by Miss Driggers that lived on Saurine Street next to him where it wasn't mean down there. She would buy the blackberries from me. But now mind you, there couldn't be no dewberries in that blackberry jar. A gallon of it, she would pay me 90 cents for them pure blackberries. But if it had a dewberry, you forget about it. That brought the price down to about 60 cents or so. Okay? I made sure I didn't put no dewberries in it. Now, I used to go over there to a locust tree. We kids hunted for treats. And I'd get these black locusts. If you them things ever got into one, they're kind of sweet.
A locust? Like the
yeah,
insect?
like the deer off a tree. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought you were talking about the insect. I thought you were talking about
No,
insect.
no, I didn't eat that. No. Let's get back to the man that did. John the Baptist did, but I didn't, okay? I knew where all the hickory nut trees was at. And it didn't take me no time to go down there and pick up a flour sack. Back then, Mama bought a flour sack per week, a 25-pound sack of flour. And the way we got our silverware, in a 25-pound sack of flour, there was a piece of silverware. It could have been a knife, spoon, or fork. It was in the bag. You didn't know. We collected enough silverware that we could make out a set for the table. Glasses, you didn't drink out of glasses. What we had was a jelly jar or something, or a little fruit jar.
So like a mason jar type thing. Yeah.
Picked it up, and that's what we got. And that's what we drank out of. On one side of the table was a bench that the table sat on. We didn't have chairs around the table except for Mom and Daddy. A bench was for the two of us. When we moved on a mill village over there, we had running water. Okay? And we had an outhouse in-house.
How old were you when you moved to the mill village?
8. And we had all these things I had never had before. I mean, but let me tell you something, James. I had never seen a lawnmower before when we came to 96. Back when I was growing up, it was considered nasty or unkept if grass was in your yard. So you kept grass cut out. And what you did was that people went down into the woods and they made call a brush broom out of dogwood trees. They bind them together, go out there in the yard, and after the yard was holed out to get rid of the grass, mama or dad, not daddy, mama or one of us children would go out there and we'd go over the yards. And we really dared anybody to come across the yard and make tracks after we done got out there and swept that.
So you were sweeping the yard?
Absolutely.
So you would like get all of the grass out?
All
Like
the
it's
grass
just
out.
dirt in your
All
yard?
the grass out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No grass.
So no grass at all?
No at all. No.
And then you came to 96 and you see a lawnmower, and what were your thoughts?
I saw a real tight mower.
With the thing with that spins?
Yeah. Push across the yard. Well, when we were up on the end of Saluda Street Extension at that time, Daddy bought a lawnmower. And I was just big enough to push that thing right there. And I got out there and I cut that grass one time. We had kind of a hill on the side we were on, but I managed. And Daddy gave me a dime. First and only time he ever gave me anything like that other than that Pepsi-Cola pack of crackers that I got for letting him cut my thumb open. And 3 days later, I was out cutting the grass again.
Let me get another dime.
But I would cut across the cow pasture down there and walk up to the Star Mercantile, which was Star Grocery at the time. And they had kits, James, and suckers and whatever. It sold for a penny a piece. I mean, something that sold for a penny back then would probably cost you 50 cents or so right now. I gather to say that. But I'd walk that far to do that. So Daddy lost his job in the mill. It was on Saluda Street. But let me back up for just a moment. When the war ended, the sound of sirens, and every day they had a whistle that blowed at noontime for prayer for all the peoples in the Second War and worked as whatever, but all the war people, the war effort. Down at the old high school in front, there was a flagpole.
Right.
And at the flagpole, too many cans wasn't seen at that time, but anybody that would take cans and they'd cut the top and bottom out of it, they could flatten them and carry them up there and put the top lids inside of it and flatten it. And we got out there and we throwed it around the flagpole, and every so often they'd come by and picked up the cans out there from the flagpole for the war effort. They were melted down.
How old were you when the war ended?
10
So
years old.
it's interesting. Like these days, there's so much talk of terrorism and all of these things. So I feel, especially since 9/11, a lot of kids growing up that are that age, they kind of are growing up under that fear of terrorism and this and that. Was there a similar feeling back then during the war? You being 7, 8, 9, like the fear of Nazi Germany coming over here and causing havoc?
I didn't feel like that. No, I didn't. But I tell you what we did have when I was on the Mill Village. We went off behind the Church of God down there, and there was a pastor that belonged to Seth Mills. And he had German prisoners over there. They allocated them out to industry. I don't know what all they did or what all they didn't do. But he had a bunch of people, German prisoners.
Here in 96, there
Here
were
in
German
96.
prisoners basically
Yeah.
doing work, like a labor.
But they went over there and cut hay in the field.
Wow.
And I've been around them over there. And hey, they just like you and me.
They're just people.
They're just people. That's all they are. And I don't know no difference. Say, if somebody treat me nice, I'm going to be nice to them. I couldn't understand them, and
Yeah.
they probably couldn't understand me. But I was around
So you were
them.
you were interacting with these German prisoners.
Yes.
So they didn't have them like secluded. They were
Oh.
out working, and you were working with them.
No,
Or you were,
no,
but you were
no,
a
no.
kid, so you were
I
just
was
around.
them.
You were playing in the fields, and you run across
that's right.
them.
Just several of us
Wow.
kids went over there to see about them. To see what it was all about.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mainly,
So these
yeah.
German prisoners over here working.
But they did have guards that was on them, from Seth Mills. They had people toting shotguns, that's what they told me. I need to stop for a moment and take a rest, okay?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
So it's pretty evident from listening to this that the world has changed quite dramatically. We had to take a break. We didn't get back to it, but I think you can see from the conversation that we had that at some point, reality seems to have taken a fork in the road, because the world that we live in today is vastly different. In a lot of ways, it's much better. In some ways, it hasn't improved as much as we would have hoped it had. But I do definitely appreciate Everett for coming in and having this conversation with me, giving me some perspective. It's always great to really see where you came from and see what it was like in your hometown. I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to go out and have conversations with people who were around before you were born. It helps you really understand your roots and why, how, and where things happen. And I also appreciate you for listening. You guys have been with me for a while. We're on episode 9. We're going to keep rolling. I know I'm not getting these out as quickly as I'd like to. I say it every time that I'll get it better. Maybe I won't. But I will keep putting them out, and they'll come out in their due time. Thank you to all my guests. Thank you to the non-existent sponsors, because guess what, people? I'm trying to keep this podcast sponsor free, so you're not listening to a bunch of sales pitches in your ears. I'm trying to keep it pure. So thank you for listening. Thank you to my guests, and I will catch you guys next time here on the Zen Podcast.